All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling teamwork. And you know what they say, teamwork makes the dream work.
Absolutely.
But what does that even actually look like? How can we all improve and become better team players?
Yeah, it's a question we all kind of struggle with no matter what we're doing, whether it's a project at work or volunteering in our community or even just family stuff.
Right, exactly. To help us kind of crack the code of teamwork, we've got some excerpts today from an article. It's called 10 Proven Team Player Interview Questions plus Answers from Workable. And I know what you might be thinking, interview questions. I'm not on the job market right now.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing. These questions aren't just for people looking for jobs. Really, they get at like the core of what makes a great team player, which you know is super valuable no matter what you're doing collaboratively.
Makes sense? So let's jump into it. Like, what are some of the key traits that make someone a really good team player?
Well, the article highlights a few that stand out. Like one is the ability to resolve issues before they become huge conflicts. It's kind of like a good team player doesn't just let disagreements simmer. They address them head on, but, diplomatically and with a mindset of, let's fix this.
Yeah, so it's not just avoiding conflict, but like handling it in a way that actually moves things forward. That makes sense. I think we've all been in situations where things are just tense and it just brings everyone down and nothing gets done.
For sure. Another big one is being able to create a really positive and supportive environment. And that goes beyond just being nice. It's about fostering a culture of respect where everyone feels like their voice matters.
I love that. It's like that feeling of psychological safety for the team so people feel comfortable taking risks and sharing ideas and you even messing up sometimes without judgment.
You got it, yeah. That safe space is huge for creativity and coming up with new ideas as a team.
Okay, so moving up with another trait, recognizing the strengths of each person on the team.
Okay, this one's interesting to me. So what does it actually mean to recognize strengths? And like, why is that so important for teamwork? Well, it means understanding that everyone brings something different to the table. It's not about expecting everyone to be a master of everything, right? It's about figuring out each person's unique talents and then using those to reach the shared goal.
It's like putting a puzzle together
Yeah,
where every piece is important to complete the picture. You wouldn't try to jam a corner piece into the middle, right?
exactly. And when people feel like their strengths are being used and appreciated, they're way more likely to be engaged and motivated and dedicated to the team.
Makes you feel like you're actually making a difference and not just filling a spot.
Totally. And last but not least, a super important quality is being able to accept feedback and always looking for ways to improve.
Oh man, this one could be tough. I struggle with it sometimes too. But I get how it's so important for growing, both individually and as a team.
It's about understanding that feedback, even if it's not all sunshine and rainbows, it's meant to help you grow. A real team player looks at feedback like a gift, like a chance to level up their skills.
It's like having that growth mindset, being open to learning from others and always getting better and better.
Exactly. Okay, and here's where things get really interesting. The article talks about how teamwork can look different depending on what your role is and where you are in the team.
Okay, that's interesting. How so? Like, how does teamwork actually manifest in different roles?
Think about it. A senior leader, they might show teamwork by handling conflict smoothly, making those tough calls that are good for the whole team, and getting everyone excited to do their best.
So, like, they're creating the environment for success.
Right. But someone who's brand new, they might be all about learning from people with more experience, being ready to jump in and help, and taking on challenges to grow their skills.
It's less about leading and more about absorbing knowledge and helping out where they can.
Yeah, exactly. And in between those two, there's like a whole spectrum of roles, each with their own way of making the team better.
So, no matter what your position is, CEO or intern,
Yeah.
everyone's got a role to play.
Yeah. Now let's talk about how to spot those awesome team players out in the wild. The article gives some good tips on this, especially for interviews, but they work in everyday life too.
Lay it on me. How do we find those teamwork superstars?
Pay attention to how people talk about their past experiences in group projects. Do they own their successes? But also give credit to other people. That's a sign of a true team player.
Makes total sense. It's that I did my part, but we all made this happen attitude.
Exactly. Another thing, look for people who can give specific examples of their teamwork, not just say they're good at it. Anyone can say, I'm a team player, but can they back it up with stories?
It's that difference between saying I'm a good communicator and actually telling a story about how you used communication to solve a problem or get a project moving.
Exactly. And being able to communicate well is another crucial ingredient. Someone who can explain their ideas clearly, listen to others, and change their communication style based on who they're talking to. They're going to do well in teams.
So it's about being able to get your point across, but also being open to other people's ideas.
For sure. And even if someone's just starting out, they can show their teamwork through projects from college or internships or even extracurricular stuff. It's all good experience.
Such a good point. Teamwork isn't just a work thing. It's a skill you build anywhere you're working with others.
Right. Okay, let's switch gears for a sec. Let's talk red flags. The article lists some signs that someone might not be the team player they say they are.
Ooh, red flags. Love it. What should we be looking for?
Number one, too much I. If someone always talks about themselves, even when describing things they did as part of a group, that's a sign they might not be great at sharing credit or acknowledging other people's contributions.
It's like they're rewriting history to make themselves the hero every time.
Exactly. And that doesn't fly in a team where collaboration and sharing success is everything.
What else? What else?
Watch out for generic answers. If they can't give you a real example, it's like they read the textbook definition of teamwork but never actually lived it.
It's like they just Googled teamwork 5 minutes before talking to you.
Yeah, exactly. It's not authentic. Next, the arrogant know-it-all. You know the type they think they have all the answers, don't listen to others, and can't take criticism.
Ah, yes. Classic. That my way or the highway attitude. That never ends well.
Yeah, that can really poison a team. A good team player is humble, open to learning from others, and knows that the best solutions usually come from working together.
So it's about knowing you don't have all the answers
Yeah.
and being open to different perspectives.
Exactly. And then we have the blame shifters. You know, those people who always point fingers instead of taking responsibility.
Oof, I know those types too. It's like nothing sticks to them. Teflon, maybe?
It's a huge red flag because it kills trust and creates a super negative environment. Nobody wants to work on a team where they're always worried about getting blamed for stuff that's not their fault.
Yeah, totally. Creates a culture of fear. The opposite of what you want in a team.
And lastly, there's trust issues. This could look like someone micromanaging others, not delegating, or second-guessing everyone's decisions.
Oh yeah, the micromanager. We've all been there.
Yeah.
It's like they don't trust anyone to do anything right.
This is especially bad coming from a leader. It crushes creativity and stops people from taking ownership of their work.
Wow. We've covered a lot already.
Mm.
We've talked about what makes a great team player, how
Okay.
teamwork looks different in different roles, and even how to spot some red flags. And there's so much more to talk about.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We'll be back after a quick message to go even deeper into real-world examples and practical strategies for becoming the ultimate team player. Stay with us.
Can't wait.
And we're back. Before the break, we were getting deep into teamwork.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what makes a good team player, what to watch out for.
Yeah, totally.
Now let's switch gears a bit. Let's talk about building those high-performing teams, like from the ground up.
Okay, I like it.
Let's say I'm leading a team, got to put together a dream team.
Yeah.
What are the big things I should keep in mind?
All right, well, first things first, you got to be super clear about the team's goals. What are you trying to achieve together? What are you aiming for?
Makes sense. You can't build a team if you don't even know where you're going.
Right, so once you've got those goals figured out, then you got to think about what skills and expertise do you need to reach those goals? Like what technical skills are must-haves? What experience is needed?
So you're making sure you got the right people for the job, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
But it's not just about those technical skills. Remember all those team player qualities we talked about before? You want people who can communicate well, share credit, have a positive attitude, you know, those problem solvers with that growth mindset.
Right, right. You could have the smartest people in the world, but if they can't communicate or work together or take feedback, it's not going to work.
Exactly. And during interviews, you can use those targeted questions we talked about before to really get a feel for how they work in teams. Ask about past group projects, how they handled conflicts, what they see as their strengths and weaknesses.
Like a teamwork test to see if they're a good fit.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I like that. And don't forget reference checks. Talk to their old bosses or coworkers to see how they were on teams.
So let's say I've got my dream team assembled. Now, how do I create that environment where they can thrive and work together really well?
Well, that's where leadership comes in. It's all about setting those clear expectations, making sure communication is open, and recognizing and rewarding good teamwork.
So it's not enough to just pick the right people. You got to create the right conditions for them to shine.
Exactly. Make sure everyone knows their role and responsibilities. Encourage regular communication, give feedback both formally and informally.
And celebrate the wins, right? Like when the team hits a milestone, acknowledge that. That goes a long way for morale.
Oh, absolutely. It's so important to create that culture where people feel appreciated and recognized. All right, now let's talk about something that's bound to happen on any team conflict.
Oh boy, conflict. We could probably do a whole deep dive on just that.
For sure.
But for now, how do we handle conflict well within a team?
Conflict's just a natural part of working with people. It's not always a bad thing. Sometimes, if it's handled the right way, it can actually lead to new ideas and growth.
Okay, so the key is how we handle it. What are some strategies we can use to make conflict a positive thing?
Well, it's important to remember that conflict often comes from just having different perspectives or values or goals. It's not always about someone being right or wrong.
So instead of getting all defensive or trying to win an argument, we got to try and understand where the other person is coming from.
Exactly. Listening is key here. Really try to understand their point of view, even if you don't agree with it. Ask questions to be sure you're understanding, put their thoughts in your own words to check, and acknowledge their feelings.
It's like creating that space for dialogue where everyone feels safe to share, even when there's disagreement.
Yeah, totally. Once you've listened and understood, then you can start looking for common ground. Find those areas where you agree or share goals. That can help bridge the gap.
It's like building a bridge instead of making the gap wider.
Love that. And compromise is usually needed. It's rare that one person gets everything they want in a conflict.
It's about finding a solution that works, even if it's not perfect for everyone.
And sometimes it helps to bring in someone neutral, like a mediator, to keep the conversation on track and make sure everyone feels heard.
Makes sense, especially when things get heated and it's tough to talk it out on your own. Okay, let's shift gears again. What about remote teamwork? That's huge these days.
Yeah, remote work, it's got its own unique challenges and opportunities for sure.
So let's break it down. What are some of the big challenges of working in remote teams?
Well, one of the toughest things is keeping that sense of connection when you're not physically together. It's easy to feel isolated when you're not seeing your teammates face to face.
Yeah, you miss those quick chats and casual hangouts that just happen naturally at the office.
Right, exactly. So you got to be intentional about making time for connection, even virtually. Schedule regular team meetings, not just for work stuff, but for casual conversations and catching up.
Like virtual coffee breaks. I love it.
Yeah. And use video calls whenever you can. Seeing each other's faces makes a big difference in building those relationships.
It brings back that human element.
And communication, that's even more important when you're remote. It's so easy for misunderstandings to pop up when you can't just walk over to someone's desk and clear things up.
Right. Things can get lost in translation so easily when it's all emails and messages.
Exactly. So over-communicate if you have to. Make sure everyone's on the same page about deadlines, roles, decisions, all that. And don't be shy about asking if something's not clear.
It's better to ask a million questions than to make a mistake because you were assuming something.
Totally. And use those online tools, shared documents, project management software, all that stuff helps keep everyone organized and on track.
They're like the glue that holds remote teams together.
Yeah, I like that. And even though you're not in the same room, celebrating successes is still super important.
Yeah.
Make sure you're acknowledging those wins, even if it's just a quick shout out in the team chat.
Yeah, those little things can really boost morale, especially when everyone's working remotely. It's that reminder that you're all in it together, even from afar.
Exactly. It's all about that shared purpose. Okay, let's shift gears a little and talk about productivity. How can we make sure those remote teams are working effectively?
I'm all ears. Any tips for getting the most out of a remote team?
Well, one key thing is to have clear expectations and guidelines for remote work. This means stuff like setting core working hours, having a system for communication, and setting boundaries between work time and personal time.
Yeah, it's easy for those boundaries to get blurred when you're working from home. You got to be intentional about it.
For sure. Encourage people to set up a dedicated workspace, even if it's just a corner of their kitchen table. It helps to get in the zone.
It's about creating that mental separation, even when the physical spaces are the same.
Exactly. And don't forget those regular check-ins. One-on-one meetings are super important to see how people are doing, talk through any roadblocks, and offer support.
Those check-ins help keep those personal connections strong, even when you're not seeing each other every day.
Right, and they help you catch problems early on. Okay, let's talk tech. Leveraging technology can make a huge difference for remote teams.
Ooh, tech. I love talking tools and gadgets. What are some of your go-tos for remote teams?
Oh, there are so many great ones out there. We've already talked about project management and document sharing, but there's also a whole world of communication platforms.
Like what? Give me some examples.
For video calls, you've got Zoom, Google Meet. Those are really popular.
Yeah, those are classics.
For team chat and instant messaging, Slack and Microsoft Teams are big ones.
Right, right.
And for keeping projects on track, you can't go wrong with Asana, Trello,
It's
Monday.com.
amazing how many options there are.
And the cool thing is a lot of these tools integrate with each other, so it's super seamless.
Yeah, it's like a one-stop shop for collaboration.
And don't forget about virtual whiteboards. Those can be game changers.
Mhm.
Platforms like Miro and Mural let teams brainstorm visually, just like they were in the same room.
That's so cool. So you can still have that whiteboard experience, even remotely.
Exactly. Okay, ready for a mind shift? Let's talk about asynchronous communication.
Ooh, that sounds fancy. What's that all about?
It's basically communication that doesn't happen in real time. It's using things like email, shared documents, those project management platforms to work together without everyone needing to be online at the same time.
So it's all about flexibility, letting people work when and where they're most productive.
Right. It can be a lifesaver for remote teams, especially if everyone's in different time zones.
So no more 3 a.m. meetings.
Uh-huh, hopefully not. But let's be real, remote teamwork has its downsides too.
For sure. What are some things to watch out for?
Communication overload can be a real problem. It's easy to get bombarded with emails, messages, notifications all day long. It can be super overwhelming.
Yeah, it's like trying to drink from a fire hose.
Ha! Great analogy. So setting clear guidelines for communication and encouraging people to be mindful of how they're communicating is crucial.
It's finding that balance between staying connected and not driving everyone crazy with messages.
Exactly. Another thing to watch out for is confusion about roles and responsibilities. When you're not all together, it's easier for things to slip through the cracks or for people to accidentally duplicate work.
Yeah, it's like a recipe for disaster.
Right, so being really clear about roles, responsibilities, and who makes what decisions from the very beginning is super important.
And write everything down. Make sure decisions, agreements, action items, it's all documented somewhere that everyone can access.
Yes, documentation is key. That becomes your team's Bible. Okay, and we can't talk about teamwork without talking about trust. Especially for remote teams, trust is huge, GE.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
But how do you build trust when you're not physically together? That seems tough.
It definitely takes effort. One thing you can do is encourage vulnerability and authenticity.
What do you mean by that?
It's about creating an environment where people feel comfortable sharing their thoughts and feelings and struggles, even if it's not all sunshine and rainbows.
So just being real with each other.
Exactly. When people feel safe to be vulnerable, they connect more, and that builds trust. It reminds us that we're all human. We all make mistakes, and we all need support sometimes.
And when you feel safe to be vulnerable, it's easier to work together, share ideas, and support each other through tough times.
Absolutely. Another important thing is to be reliable. Do what you say you're going to do. Meet your deadlines. Be responsive.
It's all about showing up consistently and proving you can be counted on.
Right. And little gestures go a long way, too. Check in on your team members, ask how they're doing, offer help, celebrate their wins.
Yeah, those little things show you care. Okay, this all sounds great in theory, but what about staying motivated? It's got to be hard to keep that energy up when you're working remotely all the time.
It's definitely a challenge. People can start to feel disconnected from the team and their work.
So how do we keep people engaged and motivated when they're remote?
Well, creating a shared sense of purpose is huge. Make sure everyone understands how their work contributes to the bigger picture.
It's about connecting the dots between those daily tasks and the team's goals.
Exactly. And celebrate those wins along the way. Hit a milestone, celebrate it. It keeps the momentum going and shows everyone how much progress you're making.
It's like little energy boosts along the way.
I like that. And recognize those individual contributions too. Even a small thank you can go a long way.
It shows people their work matters.
For sure. And, we've talked about communication a lot, but it really is crucial for remote teams, maybe even more so than in-person teams.
Okay, so any specific communication tips for remote teams?
Have clear communication protocols. Figure out which channels to use for different things, set expectations for response times, and have guidelines for virtual meetings.
So it's like a communication rulebook for the team.
Yeah, exactly. And whenever you can, use video calls. We talked about this before, but seeing each other's faces really helps build relationships and prevent misunderstandings.
It adds that personal touch.
Right. Be aware of time zones, too. If you're scheduling meetings or sending important messages, try to be considerate of your team members in different time
It
zones.
shows you respect their time.
And don't be afraid to over-communicate. It's better to give too much information than not enough.
So be proactive, be transparent.
Exactly. And document everything. Every decision, agreement, action item. Make sure it's written down somewhere. Everyone can access it.
Documentation is your friend.
It's your best friend. And one last thing, don't forget about those informal chats. Encourage your team to connect casually, talk about their lives, build those relationships.
Yeah, those informal conversations are so important for team bonding. Okay, what about conflict? We talked about it before, but how does handling conflict change when you're dealing with a remote team?
It's definitely trickier. You don't have those nonverbal cues to help you read the room. Misunderstandings can escalate quickly when it's all text and voice.
So how do you handle conflict well in a remote team?
Address it early. Don't let things fester. Encourage your team to speak up if something's bothering them, rather than bottling it up.
Create that open communication culture.
Yes. And when you are addressing a conflict, focus on the facts, not the personalities.
So instead of saying you're being difficult, you could say, I'm having trouble understanding your view on this. Could you explain it differently?
Perfect example. And be patient. It might take a little longer to work things out remotely.
Give people time and space to think and express themselves. Okay, let's talk about team culture. That seems like it would be extra important for a remote team.
You're absolutely right. A strong team culture can help bridge that physical distance and create a sense of belonging.
I love that.
Yeah.
But how do you build a strong culture when everyone's remote?
It starts with clear values and expectations. What are the principles that will guide the team's interactions? What behaviors do you want to see?
There's like a virtual team constitution.
Haha, I like that. But it's not enough to just define the values. You have to live them every day.
Walk the walk,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. And create those opportunities for team members to connect. Virtual coffee breaks, team building activities, online social events. It all helps build those relationships.
Bring the water cooler online.
Right. And celebrate those successes together. It reinforces that shared purpose. Okay, let's talk about diversity and inclusion. This is so important for any team, but it brings unique opportunities for remote teams.
I'm really interested in this. How can remote teams use diversity and inclusion to their advantage?
Remote teams have a chance to tap into a much wider talent pool. You're not limited by location anymore. This means you can build a more diverse team, which brings more perspectives and experiences to the table.
It's like expanding the team's horizons.
Exactly. And when people feel valued and respected for who they are, they do their best work and feel like they belong.
So how do we make sure remote teams are truly inclusive?
Be mindful of your language. Avoid jargon or slang that some people might not understand.
Keep it clear and simple.
Right, and be respectful of time zones and cultural differences.
That goes a long way.
And create opportunities for people to share their experiences. Maybe dedicate some time in a meeting for people to talk about their backgrounds, or create a space online to share articles or videos about diversity and inclusion.
It's about creating that space for learning and understanding. Okay, let's shift to expectations. I feel like that's got to be super important for remote teams.
Absolutely. Clear expectations are crucial for any team, but even more so when you're remote.
So how do you go about setting those clear expectations?
Start by defining roles and responsibilities. Everyone needs to understand what their role is, what they're responsible for, and how their work fits into the bigger picture.
It's like a roadmap for success.
Exactly. And establish those communication protocols. What channels do you use for what? What are the response time expectations? What are the rules for virtual meetings?
Keep that communication flowing smoothly.
Right. And set clear deadlines and expectations for the work itself. Make sure everyone knows what needs to be done, by when, and what the quality standard is.
Give them that structure and clarity.
And don't forget about performance expectations. How are you going to measure individual and team performance? What does success look like?
So everyone's on the same page about how they'll be evaluated.
Exactly. Okay, now let's talk about work-life balance. This is a big one for remote teams.
It's so easy for work to creep into your personal life when you're working from home. How do you keep that balance?
Encourage your team to set boundaries between work time and personal time.
So even though their office is at home, they still need to mentally separate work from their personal life.
Exactly. Set working hours and stick to them as much as possible, and don't expect people to answer emails or messages after hours unless it's a true emergency.
Respect that personal time.
And encourage breaks throughout the day. Get up, move around, step away from the screen,
Take care of your mental and physical health.
and use that vacation time. Everyone needs time to recharge and come back to work refreshed.
Time off is so important. Okay, let's talk about flexibility. That's one of the big perks of remote work, right?
It's definitely a huge benefit. Remote teams have a lot of flexibility, which can lead to more productivity and happier employees.
It's all about empowering people to create their ideal work environment.
Exactly. And when people feel trusted and empowered, they're more engaged and dedicated to the team's success.
So how do you create a culture of flexibility?
Focus on outcomes, not hours worked.
So it's about what gets done, not how many hours you're sitting at your desk.
Right. And empower your team to make decisions and take ownership of their work. Give them the freedom to experiment and find the best way to get things done.
Trust them to figure it out.
And be flexible with schedules and deadlines when you can. Everyone has different things going on outside of work. Be understanding and accommodating.
All about creating a supportive environment. All right, let's talk about team cohesion. That's got to be a challenge when everyone's remote.
It can be. It's easy for people to feel disconnected.
So how do you combat that? How do you create a sense of unity in a remote team?
Communication and interaction are key. Have those regular team meetings, not just for work stuff, but for social time and team building.
Bring back those water cooler moments, but virtually.
Exactly. And use video calls as much as possible. Seeing each other's faces helps build those connections.
That human element again.
Yep. And create a shared space online where the team can connect. A team chat, a shared document, a virtual whiteboard, whatever works for your team.
It's like a virtual team headquarters.
I like that. And celebrate those successes together. It reinforces that you're all working towards the same goals, even if you're not in the same room.
We're all in this together. All right, let's talk tech again. There are so many tools out there to help remote teams collaborate better.
So many. Where do we even begin?
I know, it's amazing. Give me some of your favorites.
Well, for video calls, Zoom, Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, those are all great.
Those are the big names?
Yep. For team chat and messaging, you've got Slack, Microsoft Teams again, Google Chat.
Lots of options there, too.
And for project management, Asana, Trello, Monday.com, those are all popular choices.
And for working on documents together, Google Docs, Microsoft Office 365, Dropbox Paper, those are all good options.
So many choices. And don't forget about virtual whiteboards. Miro and Mural are great for that.
It's amazing how much you can do virtually these days. It's almost like being in the same room.
Almost. And for knowledge sharing and keeping things organized, you've got platforms like Notion, Confluence, and Guru.
It's like a central brain for the team.
Exactly. Okay, we've talked about trust a lot, but it's so important I think we need to touch on it again. Especially for remote teams, building trust can be a challenge.
Okay, so any final tips for building trust in a remote team?
Encourage vulnerability and authenticity. Create that safe space where people can be themselves and share what's going on, even if it's not all positive.
So be real with each other.
Yes, it builds connection and trust.
Yeah.
And be reliable. Do what you say you're going to do. Be there for your team and be responsive.
Show up consistently.
And those little gestures matter. Check in on your team members, offer support, celebrate their wins.
It's the thought that counts. All right, let's talk about motivation again. It's got to be tough to stay motivated when you're working remotely all the time.
It's definitely a challenge. It's easy to feel disconnected and lose sight of the bigger picture.
So how do you keep that motivation going?
Creating a shared sense of purpose is key. Make sure everyone understands how their work contributes to the team's goals.
Connect the dots between the everyday tasks and the bigger mission.
Exactly. And celebrate those milestones and achievements along the way. Keep that momentum going.
Little wins keep you going.
And don't forget to recognize individual contributions. Show people their work is valued.
Little appreciation goes a long way. Okay, last but not least, communication. I feel like we've talked about this a lot, but it really is the foundation of any successful team, especially a remote one.
I couldn't agree more.
So any final words of wisdom on communication for remote teams?
Establish those clear communication protocols. What channels do you use for what? What are the expectations for response times? How do virtual meetings work?
Make sure everyone's on the same page.
And And use video calls whenever possible. Seeing each other's faces helps build those connections and prevents misunderstandings.
Makes a difference.
And be mindful of those time zones.
Always.
And over-communicate if you need to. It's better to share too much than not enough.
Transparency is key.
And document everything. Decisions, agreements, action items, make sure it's all written down and everyone can access it.
Documentation is your best friend.
And finally, don't forget about those informal chats. Encourage your team to connect casually, talk about their lives, build those relationships.
Build that sense of community, even if you're not physically together.
Hmm.
All right, last but not least, let's talk about maintaining team cohesion. It's got to be tough to feel like a team when everyone's working remotely.
It can be, but there are things you can do to create that sense of unity.
Like what? Give us some tips.
Regular communication and interaction are key. Schedule those team meetings, not just for work updates, but for social time and team building.
Virtual water cooler chats.
Exactly. And use those video calls whenever you can. Seeing each other's faces really helps.
It's all about that human connection.
They create a shared space online where the team can connect. A team chat, a shared document, a virtual whiteboard, whatever works for your team.
Virtual hangout spot.
And celebrate those successes together. It reinforces that you're all on the same team and working towards the same goals.
Wow, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive. We've really gone deep into the world of teamwork, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. From spotting a great team player to, figuring out remote work, we've really explored it all.
And speaking of making those teams work, let's talk about something that doesn't always get enough attention but is super important. Psychological safety.
Oh, yeah. Psychological safety. That's like the foundation of a really strong team, especially now when things change so fast.
Okay, so break it down for me. What is psychological safety and why is it so important?
Imagine you're on a team where everyone feels comfortable speaking their mind, sharing ideas, even if they're a little out there or challenge the way things are usually done. That's psychological safety.
It's like a space where ideas can flow freely without people being afraid to speak up.
Exactly. When you have psychological safety, people feel like they can take risks, try new things, and not get punished if they make a mistake.
Sounds like that's where the best ideas come from.
It totally is. In those safe spaces, people are more likely to point out problems early on and work together to solve them.
So it's not just about being nice, it's about making it okay to disagree and give constructive criticism.
You got it. It's not about avoiding conflict, it's about handling it in a way that helps everyone.
This is all making so much sense. But how do you actually create this psychological safety? It seems almost too good to be true.
It's not magic, but it does take effort. And leaders have a big role to play here.
Okay, so how do leaders do that? What can they actually do to create that safe environment?
Well, first of all, leaders have to show vulnerability themselves. They got to admit when they don't know something, be open to feedback, and own their mistakes.
So it's about leading by example, showing it's okay to be human.
Exactly. And they have to make sure everyone on the team feels like they can participate. That means asking for input from everyone, not just the loud ones, creating chances for everyone to share ideas, and making it clear that all those ideas matter.
Everyone gets a seat at the table.
Right. And when someone does share an idea, even if it's a little weird, leaders need to react positively.
So don't shut people down, even if the idea isn't perfect. Encourage them to keep thinking outside the box.
Yes, it's about showing that taking risks is okay. And finally, leaders need to be ready to deal with conflicts when they come up.
Don't brush those conflicts under the rug. Deal with them head on.
Exactly. By doing all these things, leaders create that culture of psychological safety. And that's what leads to innovation and better results.
Wow, this has been such an amazing exploration of teamwork. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. It's been a great conversation.
And it's not over yet. We've given you a lot to think about, but now it's your turn, dear listener.
Think about the teams you're a part of, at work, in your community, even with your friends and family. How can you use what we talked about today to be a better team player?
How can you help create that environment of psychological safety where everyone feels like they can shine?
It's up to all of us to